Well, let's get into it, Mike. I think everyone out there is super curious to know the ins and outs of how this should be done correctly, because I think that's the one of the most important things.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, obviously, also feel free to chime in and stop me if there's anything that you want me to answer on during this.
Yep.
If not, we'll just go through a little bit of information on some of the stuff that we do at Superspeed, and then we'll answer every question you guys can think up. So, let me just get started here. I lost my little clicker, but that's okay. This was kind of the main question that we started trying to answer when we were really developing this. Is we wanted to look at this comprehensively. Like, we've always been big fans of evidence-based coaching, and we never told a player to do something unless we knew there was some factual reason and there was going to be a performance gain at the end to do it. So to kind of sum this up from that 30,000 foot view, we've kind of broken down the answer to this question about what affects how far a player hits a golf ball into, I would say, 4 main categories. The first, sorry, it's going. I got to go back. The first is physical. One second. I'm going to find my little.
Was that a photo of you, Kyle? Were they your cannons that we just saw there?
Probably. There we go. Yeah, that's definitely Kyle. He's always been the bodybuilder type when it comes to physical fitness. As you can see by this photo right there. No, so physical is obviously a major element of this, and this goes way beyond just how strong a player is. This has to do with functional range of motion. This has to do with force production, power, motor unit activation. So many different aspects kind of go into this category of the physical. I like to look at this very simply, and I'm big on analogies. So I like to look at this as if we're trying to build a car, and we're trying to see every car is going to be a little bit different, and it's going to have different amounts of horsepower and different amounts of acceleration, all those different things. The physical is like, how big is the engine? Like, what kind of engine do we have in this car? Like, is this thing running on a little 4-cylinder, or is this thing running in, a race car engine? So I think this can give you a lot of potential to create speed and power. Unless it's coupled with some of the other characteristics we're going to talk about, though, it's not just a full win. Like, you can't just jump into the gym, get a bunch stronger, and immediately expect that to positively influence how far you can hit a golf ball. But, it is a major element, and it's something we should not, look at lightly. I think it is important. The next one is probably our favorite as golf coaches, which is the mechanical. And from a speed and power perspective, we created a model at Superspeed that we call the speed pyramid. So this really looks at the way a player interacts with the ground, how those forces and torques are going to affect that player's body from a rotational standpoint, since we're trying to create rotational speed in the golf swing, and then how the player uses their arms, hands, and the club to deliver that speed to the golf ball. So I know that's a generalized look at swing mechanics, but if you can put every single way you could possibly swing a club, all of those swings are going to have some types of interaction with the ground, and that's going to have a rotational sequencing pattern, and the players eventually got to transfer that out the club to the club head and transfer that energy to the ball. So speed pyramid's kind of the big deal on the mechanics for speed production. We can talk about this in a lot more detail if everybody wants, but I do feel like sometimes we get too focused, I would say, on the analytics of the golf swing and forget that the golf swing is one continuous athletic motion, and all of these things happen all the time. So trying to isolate elements and work on them as a coach, in my opinion, is nearly impossible or almost impossible. I think we tend to get much better results from coaching when we are training the full motion and trying to have some goals associated, with the ball flight or with the speed of that motion or different aspects of it, as opposed to trying to just break it down and, okay, we're going to work on only the area 4 inches around impact, or we're only going to work on the 5 inches around the top of the backswing. I think that kind of is counterintuitive, I would say, to a lot of good motor learning principles as far as how we can effectively really work on the golf swing. Not to say that technology is not a good thing. I think it's great, but it's a tool for the coach to be able to then produce good results with the player, not necessarily just for the player to know their numbers. Next piece, which I would also say is incredibly important to how far a player is going to hit a golf ball, is the category we call equipment. And this, we look at way more than just what club that player's playing. This is also going to be all your different launch monitor, numbers. This is basically the physics and ballistics of the ball flight. I look at equipment as how is the club and the ball interacting in order to produce the shot at hand. Obviously, that can be extremely efficient. That can be extremely inefficient. Let's say we've got a player who's got a race car engine. Mechanics, may be okay. They're not great. They're not perfect. And the equipment he's using doesn't match at all. We may not get any distance out of that at all. Somebody that's got a, diesel engine that has, really efficient mechanics and is actually applying that energy to the golf ball very efficiently may actually outdrive them out on the golf course. So we saw this all the time, actually, in the world. We used to work with a lot of our world long drive competitors. We always felt like it was a benefit to have the fastest club speed. And a lot of our guys did. And, generally our players would either win or they would DQ because they would miss the grit. But we always wanted the player in that sport, like if you hit your best ball, I don't want anyone to be able to catch you. And, it usually worked out about 3/4 of the time, the player that would win would be a player that hit a ball that nobody else could catch. And then that other 25% of the time, though, it was usually the guy that hit 5 in the grid every time and didn't hit them quite as far. And those other guys, DQ'd for one reason or another. So different sport, though, to coach than normal golf. Now, the final category is our, I would say, specialty, if you will. And this is going to look at the neurological side of speed production. So the neurological side of speed production, if we're going back to that car analogy and, the engine's your physical and the mechanics are all the different gears and different structures that you have put together in that. And, then the equipment is actually just that car's ability to use fuel and all that. The neurological is like the computer of the car. So this is going to be what's actually running the program and what's actually making that car go. We look at this as a backbone of something we call a motor unit. Motor units, I would say, this is something that as a coach, if you aren't very familiar with, you should become very familiar with because, there's a lot of science on the way people move and the way motor performance actually happens. And, I feel like as golf coaches, we should all be experts in motor learning and performance. It's all based on this. So the blue squiggly thing at the top, those are motor neurons in your brain. So that's actually where every motor program is housed in our body physically. So, and then, as we run a motor program, so let's say we are going to make a golf swing. We're going to go step on the first tee. Walk out to the first tee, get ready to go. My brain selects the motor program for driver swing. It's going to send an electrical signal down my central nervous system, down the nerves all through my body. That signal is going to arrive at my muscles. My muscles are then going to respond with that program motion. Now, that's an oversimplification in a few ways, but for our purposes, that's really the important piece of it. Starts in the brain, ends at the muscle responds. There's also some really cool feedback systems that our body does where our brain then says, oh, well, did the motion happen the way I wanted it to? Was it the right speed? Was it, we have kind of an expectation system, if you will, that happens whenever we run a motor program as well. Motor units are really important. One of the things that we found in our research is that we can do some different things with training the brain that you can't really do when you're trying to make changes in your golf swing, because really making changes in your golf swing means writing new motor programs. Taking an existing motor program and making a new one that's like off the template, making a new one that then has to become more dominant than the old one. And this is kind of its own webinar in itself we could talk about for the next 3 hours. But, for our purposes here, what we found is that it is possible to get your brain to expect a different result from that standard motor program that's already running. You see this all the time. Like every time we send the signal's the same. The response that we get, however, is not always the same. In fact, the response that we get could be right side of the fairway, could be middle of the fairway, could be left side of the fairway, could be, a slightly higher center hit. Low. There's enough variance from one response, neuromuscular response, to the next, that even though the motor program was the same, that we don't always get exactly the same result. This is actually the part that we play on at Superspeed in order to help people increase swing speed. Here's how it works from a practical standpoint with our clubs. Our overspeed training system has 3 clubs in the set. One's 20% lighter than the driver, one's 10% lighter, one's 5% heavier. So what I'm trying to do is get your brain to expect a faster muscular response when it pulls the trigger on the golf swing. So the way we do that is we reduce the weight of the club just enough that your brain's still firing the same motor program. So because if we get way too light, like if we just swing a shaft by itself, it's going to fire a completely different motor program because it's going to go to path of least resistance. And if you're swinging a golf shaft, you don't really have to use your lower body much. So that's going to not really affect your golf swing as much because it's not going to be the same motor program. But around 20% lighter, we find that the kinematics are about the same. The ground reaction forces are about the same. So we're essentially saying the motor program is the same one as your normal golf swing. But because of that reduced resistance, we'll see that player swing on average about 19% faster than their normal golf swing, which is a lot. So, I mean, you've been in golf lessons with players all the time. How many times do you see somebody that normally swings at 100 miles an hour swing at almost 120? Like, trying to get a conscious change on that is impossible. Like, you can't do it. But because of that reduced resistance, we can do it with Superspeed. Now, in just a couple swings, it doesn't take many, your brain starts to remember that faster reaction speed and actually starts to expect it. So then we shock the system, we change the weighting, we add a little bit of resistance back, we'll still see that player swinging on average 17% faster than their normal swing. And, to kind of prove the point, when we go to that club that's 5% heavier than the driver, if I was to give this club to somebody just by itself without anything else or having done anything else beforehand, we see that player slows down by an average of 6% almost across the board. However, because we just did those 2 lighter clubs in the sequence, when we give them the red club during a Superspeed protocol, we'll still see them swinging 12% faster than their normal swing speed. Now, again, that's a lot, especially with a club that's slightly heavier than their drivers. That's kind of the nuts and bolts of how this actually goes. So, we define overspeed training as that, making your body move faster than normal during something it already knows how to do in order to increase the expected reaction speed of the muscles of your body. So that's really the whole point. It's actually why we started calling it overspeed training back in 2014, as opposed to its previous name of overload underload training. We just thought that overspeed training was a lot more descriptive of what was actually happening physiologically during this training, which is we're just making the body move faster in order to access speed that the player can already produce. And for whatever reason, your brain's just kind of shut it off or put a bit of a governor on that engine of the car. And we're just trying to take off the governor. We do some other cool stuff in our training. All of our protocols use non-dominant training, which we find especially with players who don't do a lot of work in the gym, because a lot of professional athletes obviously do a lot of stuff in the gym and do a lot of things to balance their body out. A lot of amateur golfers do not. And we find that the non-dominant side of our training is extremely beneficial, especially to those amateur players, because a lot of times they've never used even some of those muscles on the opposite side of their body. They've certainly never tried to coordinate them in any kind of athletic way. So getting that process going in, we'll actually see direct results in the kinematic sequence with this, where we'll see an increase in especially the deceleration chain of the kinematic sequence, mainly because we're just getting more muscles activated in the non-dominant side of the body. That part becomes the dominant side stabilizing force in the golf swing. So really cool stuff that we do with non-dominant training. Also a really great little way to just, I would say, decrease injury risk and potential with golf is just, have them swing a few times the other way, just to balance things out a little bit. We get a lot of one-sided motion in the golf swing. We have 5 protocols on our website, superspeedgolf.com. You can see videos on all of these in great detail of all the different drills. We've set this up and we've actually altered it over the course of the time that we've had these products out in order to really optimize it for players, especially as they get into that, second year of training and beyond. We have every player start in level 1, regardless of skill level or ability, because this training really can be very different than things that these players have done before. So, never just assume that because a player seems like a great athlete that they're going to be able to do this and then it's not going to really wear them out. I've seen some really good athletes on the ground panting after doing just our level 1 protocol. It only takes about 5 minutes. So really important stuff there. All of the drills that are in all of these protocols work on improving ground reaction force, improving rotational sequencing, improving wrist mechanics and lag and club delivery, all of those mechanical elements of the speed pyramid. Obviously they also allow that player some freedom to be able to move more athletically, to really let the club rip through the hitting zone and, really try to experiment in ways to max out what their speed potential is going to be. So we don't tell players that they're working on all these technical things. We just tell them, look, get up there and swing the shit out of it. Like, let this thing move. I want to see the biggest number on the radar you possibly can. And it's amazing how many things improve in players' golf swings when they free themselves out of just thinking about the way they're swinging the golf club, and then they just remember that they can athletically swing it. We see a lot of different things clean up when players kind of get out of their own way in that sense and just free up and really let this thing rip. I actually call that reverse engineered coaching. You find the goal that you want to achieve and you let the player sort of discovery learn how to achieve that goal without really interfering as the coach and trying to get too much in their head about how they need to do it. And I've actually had a lot of success with players, kind of, let's say, fixing inefficiencies in their golf swing that they never even knew they had by using that method. And I feel like personally, that's kind of the gold standard for me as a coach. If I can help somebody get better and I didn't even have to tell them there was something wrong in the first place, that's an absolute full win for me as a coach. I think it's a big thing that a lot of us overlook sometimes when we're doing this. Level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5, all of these are just progressive as far as the amount of coordination required for the drills, some of the difficulty, some of the increased kind of jumping around or ground reaction force that happens, learning to stabilize those higher forces. All of that happens as you go through these protocols. We also have our 3 ASD protocols that we recommend players look at in week 20. It stands for Advanced Speed Development. These are protocols that we look at as players need if they have major deficiencies in those speed pyramid areas. So if they really they just aren't getting the process of how to use the ground efficiently to help their body rotate, or if they're just not sequencing well, or if they're just not delivering the club well, we actually have specific protocols that really hyper focus on those different areas. The reason we recommend players wait until week 20 to do those is that we're working on all of those elements in the normal protocols as well. So most of the time that stuff improves significantly by that point, and then players really wouldn't need to go into those ASDs. But if it's just not happening for the player, it's not working, these just kind of take it to the next level of intensity with those type of areas. Here's a good example of what to expect when you start super speed training. So this is a culmination of a lot of data over a lot of years now, but we see a pattern or a cycle of the results that players get when they do this training. So it's not just like a linear increase that you're going to see when you do this training. In fact, most players, in fact, nearly 100% of players see a jump in speed after the very first session that they do it. So that means if you took an average of 5 or so shots where the player's actually hitting a ball, we call that effective club speed. Effective club speed being club speed while hitting a ball in your golf swing. And then you take that average of before, then you go through the super speed training, then you do that same 5-ball average afterwards. That's kind of what this graph is showing. The blue line is the before, the red's the after. So on average, we see about a 5% jump in swing speed, in effective swing speed, right after the first session. Now, it's not magic. Your brain is going to expect that faster speed for just a short amount of time. You really haven't done enough to create permanency yet. However, if you start to work 3 days a week, a day off in between, over the next 6 to 8 weeks, you're going to go through what we call a normalization phase, where if you continue to measure that data, the before speed is going to gradually creep up to where around that jump speed was. And then again, 6 to 8 weeks in, you're going to enter what we call a plateau phase. This is where you're not going to see a big jump before and after. This is where you're going to see kind of a stabilization of that initial speed gain. We can use that to our advantage as coaches. You know, if you have competitive players, you want them to be in a plateau phase, you know, when they're going to go play the Masters. Like that's an important thing to look at. You don't want somebody in the third week of a normalization phase because, you know, well, kind of interesting story here. Our baseball guys don't care. So our baseball guys don't care at all. Like they'll just do this year round, season round, doesn't matter. Because like 30 feet further over the fence is all good in baseball. But like 10 yards over the green in golf sucks. So like you have to, you know, golf's all about honing in your exact distances. So you want to be in one of these stable phases with your players when they're going through a big round of tournaments. We also have found that you can purposely extend these plateau phases if you so choose. So if you have that big competitive streak of tournaments, I wouldn't stop doing the training altogether, but you could reduce the frequency down to once a week, maybe even twice a month. You won't see any degradation in the amount of speed gain that you've gotten, but you also won't push yourself into that secondary jump, which usually happens about 4 to 6 months into the training if you go through just straight. Usually once you've gotten into that level 3 protocol and really started to push into that one, on average, we'll see about another 3.5% jump in swing speed, and then another normalization phase, another plateau. And it seems to happen out of the blue for players. Like, and this is consistent with some other things that happen with types of Olympic lifting training and power training in the gym as well. But, you know, it's not like you can just, I mean, it honestly feels like one day you just came in and the weight that you could barely lift the time before, it was just easy that day. And it's the same thing for this. It's like, you know, you were always bumping right around that 105 range, and all of a sudden the next day it's like it's 109. And that's just, you know, kind of happens out of the blue, normalizes, and then goes to another plateau. Theoretically, this pattern, this cycle happens forever, meaning that there are additional jumps you can get, just with diminishing returns. So there's going to be longer periods of time between the jumps, and the jumps are going to be smaller as you go through the years of training. Another piece I want to throw in there before we're done here is just to talk a little bit about our Superspeed C Club that we launched back in January of this year. So that's counterweight training. So, you know, we always saw really big increases in, you know, I've wanted to look at it from a ground reaction force side, like peak vertical force for players that use a lot of vertical force. We saw a lot of increase in torque for players that were more torquey kind of players. We always would see big increases in rotational velocity in the pelvis and thorax segments in the kinematic sequence. And we would see gains as well in the arm and the hand segments and release speed of the golf club. But those numbers percentage wise were not as big as the ones in the big muscle segments of the body. So we always felt like there was more to gain there. So we started doing some research a few years ago on counterweight training, which is, you know, mainly it's changing the physics of the motion by changing the weight distribution of the golf club instead of changing the overall weight, in order to really get an overspeed training effect just on one area of the golf swing. And in this case, we're really looking at that area right around impact, you know, leading up to the hitting zone, trying to create as much acceleration in that point as well to increase hand, arm, and release speed. You know, we do that with our Superspeed C Club, which is, you know, you can see kind of a big counterweight on the end that you actually grip below that counterweight. So you want the weight behind your hands. It's important because as the club starts to release, it like has sort of a slingshot motion of letting the club release much faster than it normally can. It reduces the resistance dynamically. That's a big deal. So it has 3 of its own protocols. They're more focused on arm, hand, upper body speed. You know, those training protocols can work completely on their own. So this is its own independent training system as well. Also works very well in conjunction with the normal overspeed training system. You know, so we have players that just start with Superspeed C and then add in overspeed training. We have some that start with overspeed training, maybe have done that for years, add in the counterweight training, and they get some big gains on that too. We have other players that actually do all of this together. So I guess quick version on that. You know, if you're going to do this together starting out, we usually recommend 2 days of overspeed training, 1 day of counterweight. if you've been doing overspeed training for a couple of years, you're in that level 4 or 5 protocol already. We'd actually cut the reps in half on the overspeed training and add in the Superspeed C protocol every time you do it. So some cool stuff there to integrate with your players. It's always fun to have something new for them too. You know, this is kind of the main thing I look at as far as how and why a lot of this works. You know, just as human beings, through our development, so as we're growing up as junior golfers or athletes or whatever it might be, you know, we sort of create what we call our athletic ceiling. So athletic ceiling is sort of a equation of a human being's genetics and what they've done from a training and you know, sports and activity standpoint for their entire childhood up until their, you know, late teens, early 20s, depends for different people. But that's going to kind of set the bar of what the peak potential for that human being is going to be from speed and power production. Now, on the downside, after your early 20s, you really can't change what the athletic ceiling is. So that's been determined. You're not, you know, going to be able to move that around. Now, that seems discouraging, and it seems counterintuitive to the fact that we have players in their, you know, 60s and 70s gaining a ton of golf speed on their golf swing. And this is where I really go back to that, like, governor side on the engine, right? Like, throughout our life, there's all kinds of different things that can happen that can cause your brain to put additional governors on how fast your body can move. Could be pain, could be injuries, could be just the thought of pain. It actually can be our fault as golf coaches putting too much technical crap in that player's head, making them think too hard about what they're trying to do as opposed to being athletic. All of those can start to create neurological limiters on how fast that player can move. So really what we're doing with Superspeed with those players is just, again, taking the governor off the engine. We're getting them back to the point of functioning closer to their athletic ceiling, whatever it might be. Now, the other exciting part of this is that it also works really well for junior golfers and kids to start to increase and create that highest potential, highest athletic ceiling possible. And I think that's a really exciting thing, because when you look at, you know, your like super powerful golf athletes, your long drive professionals, the stuff that they were doing as kids is not normal. I mean, they were doing crazy stuff playing hockey, or, you know, jumping around, doing 360 jumps on ice, and all kinds of nutty stuff when you start to look into the background of those players. But it's one of the reasons that they have such a high power potential as adults, is they did all that stuff when they were kids. We know how to train that now. So I think that's why you see such a crop of players coming out on tour now that just hit it so far, because we have better science on what to do to train them to make it happen. So cool. We have some other cool stuff online. If you guys want to check out our certified program, superspeedcertified.com. It's a 3-level online certification program. Really dives in more depth, I would say, to everything that we talked about here today. Consider this an overview of, you know, about, you know, 8 hours of work that you can do online if you really want to learn more about all of this. And yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the pieces we wanted to go over for now. What
Mike,
questions can we answer for you?
Mike, that was, I know why you're in business with him, Kyle. That was incredibly impressive. Love that. There was like, I think that information, if everyone could get that information, it would just clarify so many things. I think it's just really, really good, Mike. And like straight away, even though I've got to still do the last protocol, the one thing I really took away from what you just said then is the misconception that probably most people think that doing the training, the benefits are coming from, you know, generating more muscle mass, or just, you know, hitting it faster because you're getting stronger and maybe obviously getting the sequence better. But the thing that I hear is that it's about training the brain. The brain is, you know, the most important thing to train that, to be able to work as fast as possible, get used to training as fast as possible. And it's the exact opposite of muscle memory, isn't it? Which is this, obviously, a bit of a misnomer, really, isn't it? It's about the brain needs to know the muscles will react, I would say.
Yeah, it just all goes down back to motor programs, right? Yeah. Like, motor programs govern how we move during every motion that we've learned how to do for our entire life. And again, it's a very complicated system, but the basis of it is your brain sends a signal, your body responds. You know, and I think it's very important to look at that. There's a lot of different pieces to that puzzle, but trying to train for a more efficient response is a really important thing. And it does require I would say, a different set of rules, you know, because yeah, people aren't, you know, this is not strength training. You're not going to get stronger by doing super speed.
Yeah.
The main thing that's happening here is, again, just allowing your body to do something that was inhibited in some way before by your brain and taking those limitations off.
Yeah. So I've got a question here, which is I've got a few that's been emailed through to me. So Ollie Tucker, who's over in London, he wanted to know, you know, what are the prerequisites in terms of strength and mobility? What sort of prerequisites do they need in the first place? Like, do you find that, you know, potentially, you know, people that are slightly more uncoordinated or not as athletic, or older people, is there any prerequisite, or do you feel like it's just appropriate for everyone?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big piece there is, you know, if you can go out to the range and hit golf balls and not be in pain, then it's safe to go do this training. Now, that's, again, an oversimplification, but I mean, obviously, if you do have any amount of pain that happens during your golf swing, you should definitely consult a medical professional prior to doing speed training.
Yeah.
But we created the system for everybody. Like, we created the system so that your weekend golfer that doesn't have a strength and conditioning coach and doesn't have a golf coach necessarily and doesn't have a team around them can safely do this training and get benefit. So I always like to look at this on the good, better, best side, good, better, best scale, right? You know, good, you have no coaches at all, but you want to work on speed in your golf swing. You're not in pain. Grab this, do our protocols. You're going to see a result. Fine. Wherever you're starting physically, you know, we do enough stuff in there to work on coordination and to work on motor unit activation on the non-dominant side. A lot of those things that, you know, definitely help everybody. Better, you know, would be that, you know, let's say that you have somebody you work out with in the gym. So you've got a trainer, you know, so they're already kind of assessing your body and they know where you're strong, they know where you're weak, and they can actually tell you that, you know, here we're going to do this course of strength training, and at this point you're going to be at sort of peak power production, and that's going to be the best time to start this training. That would be better. Best would be also incorporate a golf coach in there so that simultaneously, while you're doing all of this work with your body and on the speed, you're also working on a lot of the skill elements of the golf swing that are really important. Because that's a question we get a lot is, you know, is this going to make me hit the ball everywhere if I get faster? And the answer is not just a simple yes or no. It's going to say, well, what was your skill level of face control and ball flight control prior to doing the training? Because if you don't work on that, it's going to be the same as it was before. So, you know, if you sucked at ball control with your 100-mile-an-hour golf swing, you're probably going to still suck at ball control with your 105-mile-an-hour golf swing. And, you know, potentially because it's going faster, it could go further off the fairway. However, if you're really good, like what we see with a lot of our high-level players and our tour players, if they're good at controlling the face and the skill elements are highly evolved, we see zero change in their skill abilities to play golf after they do this. They're just hitting it further. In fact, we always joke, it's usually the fourth ball, right, Kyle, when we have a tour player do this for the first time. Usually they're like panting and dead tired right after the training. So the first few swings, like first couple, they're just trying to find it a little bit. Usually the fourth ball flies about 25 yards further than you're used to seeing, and their chin hits the ground. So that's kind of the general rule of thumb on that.
Yeah.
Can I add to that, Baden, a little?
What was that?
I want to add one thing on that. I think we see this a lot from maybe the strength and conditioning perspective, where kind of we're taught, and I was taught, you know, you got to have these bases of your flexibility, mobility, you know, core stabilization, strength, and power. And you got to be very careful to insert any type of speed or power coaching before then. And doing super speed, you know, is kind of its own separate, unique training. It doesn't fit in with each of one of those categories. And I kind of would have thought that it would go a little differently when we've done it in the beginning, but after seeing tens of thousands of golfers do this and watching them, I think we have a good idea of what's going to happen with different populations. And as long as people follow what we recommend with a really good dynamic warm-up, making sure you're doing the non-dominant swings, not overtraining, we really don't see a lot of negative benefit. We're looking obviously out there. Are we hurting people? Are they, you know, getting something goofy in their golf swing? And we don't want to promote that either. So that was a big concern of us, but we really don't see that a whole lot. And I think that the two reasons, one Mike mentioned, are the non-dominant swings, but we keep the volume very low to start. And we also aren't hitting the ground. And I think impact forces play a huge role in injury and what's going on with the body. And it's a very different type of sensation in the body when you're hitting the ground in a ball versus not. And I think that's very much overlooked.
Yeah, I think that's really, really true. I didn't think of that And the other benefit, I think, that people often try and hit down too much in their golf swings as it is. So if you're standing up and hovering a foot off the ground, and it's actually going to be better for your mechanics anyway, isn't it? So you can get your
They're more efficient. Yeah, if we can get a player more efficient and moving more athletically, they're going to hurt themselves less in general versus if they're doing things that might, sequence poorly or whatever it is. Generally, people get hurt more that way than if they're becoming more athletic and kind of tapping into, using the lower body up through the trunk, into the arms, into the club.
So yeah, I've got another question here. Like if a student does get it wrong, so they're at home and they're training with it, what are the common things they do get wrong?
Try to be too technical with their golf swing.
Right.
I mean, this is
When
rampant. When we've met with a lot of our LPGA players, especially out at events, like very cautious, shy a little bit sometimes about swinging it. We've had a few that definitely weren't. And I think that's always been really good when we've been able to see that out there. But I definitely feel like a lot of players are very, I would just say, indoctrinated that their swing has to hit these different positions and has to be mechanically sound in their head, or there's going to be really bad things happen in their golf swing. And we find that if players can work more athletically based on, the way their body's going to be really moving optimally. And I think people's bodies move efficiently when they're allowed to do so. It's kind of a wild thing, but like, it's amazing to see when somebody stands up in front of one of those little radars and just tries to make the thing move faster, the amount of mechanics that actually get better in their golf swing or clean up right away. And I just look at it from the back end perspective, right? Like if your swing just went 6 miles an hour faster, theoretically something had to improve in the efficiency of that motion somewhere. In some part of it had to become more efficient, or it couldn't have gone faster. Like you can't just magically make it faster. The motion had to become more efficient to get faster. So
Yeah.
I'd say that's kind of the way I put that.
No, and I actually completely agree with that. Like I've done it for years in that I've taken the club head out of things all the time. Like whether I just get someone to swing a handle of a club or I turn the club around and get them to swing it that way and take the weight out of it. Because when people are trying to put things in positions and they're trying to control the club or they're trying to or lock their arms or whatever it might be, it not only leads to less power, but they can't hit it straight either. That's the thing. So there's absolutely no doubt. I can see absolutely why. It's both. It's speed and accuracy come with improved mechanics through doing stuff like this. There's no doubt.
I think the other things we see, Baden, are people wanting to overtrain. I mean, more is not better with this. And they're like, well, I want to do this every day, or I want to do this 2 times a day. There's a very specific reason why we are creating the rest periods we're doing in there. It's not, as we mentioned, a strength type of program where you're going to feel typical muscle soreness or whatever it might be. This is a neurological training, and the recovery that you're going to need for that is very different. And so a longer period of time to make sure you come out that next session fresh is very important. If you're in the next session and you're tired and you're not achieving the speeds you were the session before, you're probably going to go backwards. We don't expect each session to be necessarily gaining gains, but we're not looking for you to get so tired that you're not able to even perform what you were hopefully the last session. So overtraining, I think, is a big one. And also make sure you're doing the light to heavy. Don't try to do it in a heavy to light or kind of screw around with the way the clubs are moving. We specifically have that designed in the protocols for a reason, and maybe Mike can expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, no, that is an important point. And I think that it gets confused, and a lot of us out there that are maybe recommending some heavy to light protocols that are different than what ours are. The best way I can explain it is that heavier stuff is going to help you warm up. Lighter stuff is going to help you move fast. So a lot of the ones that are out there are just like a protocol that may have some heavy stuff at the beginning, but more of that's like a warm-up period of that protocol before you do the speed training. We've just found that, well, I mean, even in our warm-up, if you do our warm-up fully, there's a full body dynamic warm-up, and then there's some swings gradually getting faster with the heavy club in our set. Right? So our warm-up actually does end with the heavy club, but the speed training starts with the light club, because if you're not moving faster, you're not speed training. So I think that's where the general confusion, if you will, or differences have come in a lot of different people that have recommended protocols is, we're all saying the same thing in just a slightly different way. And everybody likes to argue on the internet, and we generally disengage. But I would say that's kind of where it is. You know, think about heavy stuff helps you warm up, light stuff helps you move fast.
Yeah. And I think it's like anything, even if you're not doing super speed or you are just working on some technical stuff, it's all still a process. Like it's not ever going to come, you know, in a couple of days. And that's probably why people overspeed train. They're like, I've got to play this weekend. I really want to carry it past my best friend sort of thing. Like just like anything in life, whether it is a big mechanical change in your golf swing, change of concept, increase in speed, you just need to go through the protocols and be in and take the process and take time to get it right. I would imagine
that's why we've tried to lay that out as
Yeah.
clearly as possible for people on the website. And honestly, I hope we've done a good job of making this easy for people. I mean, that was one of the main things we were developing the product is like, how do we make this as easy as possible? Like, how do we simplify it and just make it completely foolproof that people are going to do this right? And, you know, obviously the color coding tries to make it easier, and all of those little details of the protocols, just they all kind of follow the same pattern. Like, we just want people to do this stuff correctly because we know it's going to help them if they do it right.
Yeah, no, I think so. You've done an amazing job of it, to be perfectly honest. And if you can, any coaches out there, you should absolutely go onto the site and go through the protocols and understand the processes. It's really, really well done. So what, maybe in closing here, guys, you just brought it up there, Mike. So obviously the internet is a very, very loud place. You hear probably the same things all the time, you know, which might be complaints or, you know, questions or concerns they have about it. What's the main one that you do here, I suppose, and how would you sort of rebut that or think about it?
Kyle can probably answer it better than me. He's watching that a lot more in tune than I am on a day-to-day basis. But you know, I would say overall, like most of the response we get is very positive because, you know, we hear a lot of great stories of players gaining speed, and, you know, on the amateur side, that can be a big deal. Like, I mean, some of my favorite stories that we hear as feedback, you know, sometimes are like, now I remember specifically there was this guy in Rhode Island that, you know, had, you know, just won a bout with cancer and had lost a lot of strength, and, you know, was trying to get back into playing golf, but like was not able to carry the ball over some forced carries at his golf course. And his buddies that he'd been playing with for the last 15, 20 years, like he's 30 yards behind him now where he used to be ahead of him. And, you know, this stuff was something that helped him like get back to almost where he was before that whole thing, to be able to really, you know, put energy back to his body and get that going. So, yeah, I mean, I like to look at a lot of those on the positive side. I try not to get overly in detail about let's overanalyze every little detail of these things. Like, again, I'm a big picture kind of person when it comes to coaching. I think that's something a lot of players miss in a lot of ways. I think it helps people a lot faster. But Kyle, I'm sure there's some other little details that we do hit across every now and then.
Yeah, I think a couple of things that people touch on quickly are the non-dominant swings and the kneeling swings. I think from the outside looking in, they just look goofy. They don't maybe make a lot of sense to some people. I think it does set us apart and why we got this. So the reason we haven't really released any new products except for this counterweight club since the beginning is we just continue to want to educate people on, yes, it's a weight with a shaft with a grip, but there's way more to it in terms of the weighting structure, the length of it, the way the shaft is made, the protocols behind it, and how you do them, and how it complements everything else you're doing. And that's just a continual thing that more and more people are seeing us and coming in at the beginning and making sure they understand what's happening with the product. So I think sometimes there's this knee-jerk reaction of that doesn't look like a golf swing, or that doesn't look, it looks like it's going to mess up my mechanics or whatever it will be. And there's a lot of thought that we put into this. And I think as a training aid, we've tried to separate ourselves in that we use technology, we use data to quantify and qualify what we're doing. So we use 3D technologies, we use ground force technologies, we use wrist mechanics technologies, we have the launch monitors, and all this stuff is put through that on Mike and I's side to make sure that, yes, the product looks good and everything, but it's working, and why is it working, and then how's it affecting the rest of their game. I think I just continually stress that that's why we do what we do, and it definitely does help to back it up with some technological data, and especially also with the statistics people out there too are really helping us to show why you need to actually start to gain distance and what it does for the rest of your game.
Absolutely. Look, I've already said it, but you do a fantastic job in your website, in all of your comms, I think, of explaining all these things. And you just got to keep doing that, don't you? You just keep educating people. But I mean, there's enough social proof out there, whether it be the PGA Tour, the average coach, the average student. It's just been a revelation. And, you know, if this thing was something that was only going to be a fad, it would have stopped, 3 years ago, but it just keeps powering on and getting bigger and bigger. So, guys, thank you so much for that hour. That was real. I thoroughly enjoyed that myself, Mike. That was epic to listen to. And just congratulations on all your success. It's just awesome to see. And yeah, as I said, I don't know if you consider yourselves a training aid or something even beyond what a training aid has the potential to do. But there's absolutely no training aid on the market that has as great education and information about what you do. So coaches out there, make sure you jump onto their website and have a look. But thanks a lot, boys. Absolute pleasure. We'll do this again in the future, no doubt.
Absolutely. Really appreciate you having us on. I mean, and obviously we're here to help. So if there's any coaches that need information or have questions, you can always get in touch with us at info@superspeedgolf.com or through the website. All our social media handles are at Superspeed Golf. Just, feel free to hit us up if there's anything we can do to help you guys get this stuff into your players' hands or help them gain some more speed. So, we're here to help.
Awesome, Mike. Thanks, Kyle. You got the last thing to say?
We're looking forward to doing more with Skillest. I think we have a lot more to do, including putting some stuff through the platform. So I think that's our next step.
Yeah, I can't wait to get involved. As I said, I'd love the education thing is just huge. And if we can help you guys do that with students around the world and just make sure that people are doing everything the right way, I think there's really powerful opportunity there for both of us.
I'm already getting lessons myself through the program, like I told you. So I love the platform.
I know, it's fantastic. And you're improving. Are you already seeing improvement?
Oh yeah, it's been great, especially the ease of use and just being able to do it digitally right now is so good.
So good. Lots more coming.
I mean, he's like a solid +1 wherever we go. So.
Wow. Always looking to improve. That's the main thing.
I need to get some more speed too.
Well, you can maybe work on the cannons a little bit. That might be just a missing link.
Yeah.
That's next.
All right, boys. It's been an absolute pleasure. We'll speak to you really soon.
All right. Thanks a lot. Have a good day.